was speaking with a high-functioning professional, I'll call him Sam, who said something that perfectly captures modern burnout. He said, "Tony, I can feel my body begging for rest, and I treat that signal like an accusation." And as he said it, he laughed, but his shoulders were up, his breath was tight, and he looked braced. He said, "The moment I slow down, I hear it. Lazy, weak, falling behind. So I push harder, and then I crash." If you recognise that, if rest triggers guilt, or you can't switch off, or you keep functioning until suddenly you can't, I want to offer a reframe. In the PsycheVita approach, symptoms are signals, messages that life's demands have exceeded our current internal capacities. And burnout's signal is often this: my system is depleted, but I don't feel allowed to stop. This video's core claim is burnout isn't a character flaw, it's a trainable skills gap where rest has become shame instead of data. If you want to practice these skills step by step, you can do that in PsycheVita, on the site or the app. And if you're in overdrive, start with the Rest Without Shame pathway, linked in the description. I'm a psychotherapist, executive coach and clinical supervisor, and an award-winning therapy researcher. I'm Dr. Tony Weston. I work with people who look capable on the outside, but whose nervous systems are often running a hidden deficit. Over time, I stopped believing this pattern was primarily diagnostic. It's often developmental, and that matters because diagnosis tends to ask, what category does this belong to? Development asks, what skills need to be built next? In this video, we'll build 3 skills that change burnout at the root. 8.2, Somatic Attunement, to hear your body's signal early. 3.4, Healthy Self-Worth, so that signal doesn't become self-attack. 8.4, Recovery and Decompression, so you can downshift in ways that actually retrain your system. For regular viewers, you'll know my professional interest, shaped by working with many clients. Most suffering looks different on the surface, but underneath it's often a self-regulation and shame problem in disguise. When self-regulation and self-worth weren't reliably taught, the nervous system improvises safety strategies. Different behaviours, same job. And if you've ever felt too complicated because you've been given too many diagnoses or too many labels, this is one way to see the unifying layer underneath. So a lot of what we call symptoms can be understood like this. OCD can become safety through thinking and checking. Hyper-responsibility can become safety through over-functioning. Dissociation or numbness can become safety through shutdown. Social anxiety can become safety through invisibility. Attachment avoidance can become safety through distance and self-reliance. Panic can become safety through reassurance checking and escape. And burnout can become safety through overdrive, pushing through depletion to avoid shame. In this video, we're going to use burnout as the example and rebuild the foundations underneath it. Regulation first, then shame resilience. So back to Sam. His nervous system didn't choose laziness, it chose protection. When his body said, "I need rest," what his system heard was, "If I stop, I'll be judged, I'll fall behind, I'll lose standing." And that's why rest didn't land as data, it landed as an accusation. Let's start with the part most people miss. Burnout isn't just too much work, It's often a body that learned early to override its own signals. And yes, that vulnerability can begin before school, not because your parents meant harm, but because of the environment you adapted to. Some of us grew up in homes where being tired, upset, or overwhelmed wasn't met with soothing. It was met with pressure, criticism, or emotional absence. So we learned a primitive rule: push through, don't need, don't stop. And that rule doesn't live in your thoughts first, it lives in your body. Now, a quick map, because it matters for why this pattern can feel so stubborn. PsycheVita is built around the Lifelong Capacities Map, the 48 psychological and emotional skills that help people overcome the full range of mental health diagnoses and symptoms and perform at the highest levels. In an ideal world, those skills develop in a sequence, because smooth functioning of the higher skills depends on solid foundations of the lower skills. For simplicity, we group them into layers. When I say layers, I also mean rough developmental windows, not deadlines. Layer 1 is regulation of our body and our emotions, and it develops first, roughly from just before birth to around age 6. There are 8 skills to master here. Layer 2 is self-worth and shame resilience. It develops strongly around ages 3 to 9. There are 4 skills to master here. Layer 3 is thinking and follow-through that tends to be built around 7 to 14. Layer 4 is meaning, motivation and direction that deepens around 12 to 25. Layers 5 to 6 are connection, influence and wisdom, and those capacities keep developing through adulthood, with integration deepening from around 25 onward. Those are windows, and here's the hopeful part. If a layer didn't get enough support early on, it doesn't mean you're stuck. It means you have a trainable skills gap. That's what PsycheVita is, building the foundations now at any age with small, repeatable practices. Many people try to solve burnout at the level of plans, rules, motivation, or willpower. Those are mostly higher layer strategies. Layer 3, thinking and follow through, and layer 4, purpose and direction. But the vulnerability is usually lower down, regulation and worth, layers 1 and 2. Those are the layers where effective change needs to happen. So our first skill is 8.2, Somatic Attunement, noticing the earliest cues before depletion becomes collapse. Much of what shaped us early on is learned procedurally, like muscle memory. We don't think our way into it, we practice our way into it. This kind of learning is precognitive. It happens before language and insight. Think about learning to walk. You don't learn walking by analysing it. You learn through body-based repetition until your body has the procedure. Foundations learned early shape what becomes possible later. And in the same way, many of us learn our relationship with rest, feelings, and worth through repetition too. By the time school began, many people were already carrying a body-based rule: push through, don't need, don't stop. So burnout often looks like a productivity problem, a motivation problem, or a purpose problem, but the vulnerability is usually lower down. If your body can't signal early and safely, and if your worth system turns rest into shame, you'll override until your system forces you to stop. So our first skill is 8.2, Somatic Attunement. That sounds like this. Not I'm burnt out, earlier than that. My jaw is tight, my breath is held, I feel wired and tired. My chest is braced. I'm pushing through on fumes. That's the signal arriving early, and early is where change is possible. And just a brief safety note. Some feelings are too big for one person to carry alone, especially when they relate to early trauma, early neglect, or body-based distress that was never safely held in the first place. If this material stirs something very young, very strong, or very overwhelming in you, it may be wiser to practice with co-regulation with a trusted support person or with a therapist trained in somatic work, body-based trauma work, or focusing, so the feelings can be held safely, not flooded. Now, let's name the mechanism that turns depletion into burnout. It's the loop. Firstly, the body signal: fatigue, fog, irritability, heaviness. Second, the meaning: rest means I'm failing. Third, the response: override, caffeine, scrolling, grit, one more task. 4, short-term relief: you feel in control again. 5, the long-term cost: depletion deepens and eventually you crash. And notice the key ingredient: shame. Shame is the nervous system's alarm that says my worth is at risk. In everyday language, it sounds like I'm useless, I'm falling behind, I'm letting people down, I should cope better, I'm weak, I'm not good enough. So we need a second skill, 3.4, healthy self-worth, the ability to experience a limit without turning it into self-contempt. And here's the knife line, because this is what keeps the pattern alive. Every time we override depletion to feel safe, we teach our nervous system that rest is dangerous and shame becomes the fuel for overdrive. Examples of override that look normal in adult life: saying yes when your body says no, working through lunch as a default, needing a screen to numb instead of decompress, treating exhaustion as a motivation problem, only resting when you're forced to by illness. This isn't about blaming ourselves, it's about updating the operating system. So what does recovery actually look like? It begins when we can hear a body signal remove the moral verdict and respond with a real downshift. The goal is that we can say this sentence as neutrally as we state our height. My body is telling me I need a rest. Not as confession, not as failure, as data, like I'm 5'11". When you can do that, 3 things are happening at once. 8.2, Somatic Attunement. You can hear the signal early. 3.4, healthy self-worth. The signal doesn't become a moral verdict. 8.4, Recovery and Decompression. You can respond with an actual downshift, and that is a skill in itself. So we keep it procedural. Notice the signal, remove the moral verdict, then do a body-based downshift. Because this isn't solved by a perfect holiday. It's solved by small repeatable downshifts that teach your nervous system, I can slow down and still be safe. I can rest and still be worthy. Burnout is not just being tired. It's when depletion, shame, and override become a repeating system. These tiny cues aren't the change themselves, they're how we teach our nervous system that another response is possible. We start small because it's doable even when we're overwhelmed. By repeating it, we interrupt the old if this, then that procedure, just enough to create space. Over time, those micro pauses let us choose a different behaviour, one that honours our needs and values. This is the mechanism behind PsycheVita's skills training. Small, repeated, body-based reps that teach our nervous system a new default. And here's the paradox. When you take the burnout signal seriously, that life's demands have exceeded your current capacity, and you train the capacities underneath, you often become more effective. You get more done with less strain. This is neuroplasticity. Small, repeated shifts become the brain and nervous system's new default. PsycheVita was built to make that kind of developmental work more accessible and repeatable, not to replace therapy, but to support capacity growth between sessions. Insight can help us understand a pattern. A good therapist can help us feel held, seen, and regulated. AI can help us reflect and think between sessions, but many of these skills only become reliable through small repeated reps, and that's the role PsycheVita Grow was built to support. I'm going to invite you to do this with me, if it's safe to do so. Do the smallest version that's possible for you right now. Before we begin, quietly rate your current level of activation from 0 to 10, where 0 is the most relaxed and 10 is the most stressed. There is no right number, just notice it. Let your shoulders drop by 5%, unclench your jaw by 5%, and lengthen your out breath. Now, breathe in for 3 and out for 6. Again, in for 3, out for 6. Now, say quietly and factually, my body is telling me I need a rest. That's not a flaw, it's information. I can take a 1-minute downshift right now. You'll find a longer psychescription version of this practice inside PsycheVita. Follow the rest without shame pathway linked in the description. Quietly rate your activation again from 0 to 10. Not changed, even slightly. Even noticing no shift is useful data. It tells us what your system needs next. Practice. For the next 7 days, keep it simple. Practice this exact reset once a day, the one we just did together, just for a few minutes. You can do it in 2 ways. 1. Rewatch this part of the video and practice along with me. Or 2. Use the longer psychescription inside PsycheVita in the rest without shame pathway, linked in the description. The point isn't perfection. The point is repetition. Because every repetition is a tiny lesson to your nervous system. I can slow down and still be safe. To land this carefully, burnout often isn't laziness, weakness, or poor character. It's a nervous system that learned early to override needs and then learn to feel shame when those needs show up. So here's the line to remember. Burnout begins when rest becomes shame. Recovery begins when rest becomes data. If you want to practice these skills step by step, you can do that in PsycheVita, on the site or the app. The Rest Without Shame pathway is live on PsycheVita. Free long video, worksheet and psychescription with optional guided training. The link is in the description. You're not broken, you're adapting.